So one of the toughest pills to swallow for people, even out there in my audience, is that the Innocence Project is not a well-meaning organization that started off good and eventually got corrupt and had all these problems or has these isolated incidents where they're advocating for guilty people. From the jump, the Innocence Project was founded by a member of O.J. Simpson's legal team, somebody who is absolutely guilty, and they are ideologically motivated to undermine and subvert the criminal justice system by any means necessary. Essentially, you should think of them as Antifa with law degrees. And what we're going to talk about today is a murderer who was gotten out of prison by the Innocence Project in California, in San Francisco, who received the largest payout in San Francisco history of $8 million, and how it was just revealed by the San Francisco Standard that the attorney for this murderer, who was 100% guilty, knew that he was guilty and essentially entered into a romantic relationship and gave financial payouts to a person to confess in order to say that this guilty man was not involved. I'm going to break down this whole case for you, but understand it's not isolated, it's not unique, it's not a one-off, it's what the Innocence Project does. But before we get into that, thank you to everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
So first off, right off the top, I want to say thank you to Nuance Bro for sending me this article a little while ago, and since I have had the time to look into it, I am able to present this to you. Now, some other people have covered it, I am sure, at this moment in time, but we really got to break it down, and honestly, it starts from the headline, in my opinion, because it is quite telling that this could happen in the United States of America. The murderer, prison romance, and false confession shaking up the Innocence Project. Subheadline: convicted murderer Marritte Funches says he lied to get Maurice Caldwell exonerated of murder by the Northern California Innocence Project. In the process, Caldwell's attorney and Funches fell for each other. So this, of course, involves the release and so-called exoneration of a convicted murderer who did in fact commit the crime, called Maurice Caldwell. And this guy is presented as a spokesperson for the Innocence Project.
Almost 21 years, 20 years, 6 months, 4 days. How did I keep hope? When you got a cat in the corner, no matter what, that cat will do what he got to do.
And of course, he was released and paid out in 2021 during the height of the Black Lives Matter hysteria. But the attorney that was behind this, the schemer that allowed this to happen, the innocence fraudster that you could point your finger at, is a woman called Paige Kaneb.
My name is Paige Kaneb. I'm an attorney with the Northern California Innocence Project. And this summer, when I'm not working, I have been at the beach, mostly in my garden with my daughter, or baking, or reading. We both love to read, and I've been making my way through the Black Lives Matter reading list. And my favorite book I'm currently reading that is not on that list is Ida B. Wells' autobiography called Crusade for Justice. It's incredible and inspiring, and she's been blowing my mind left and right.
Now, despite the fact that Paige Kaneb, you will find out throughout the course of this article, 100% knew that Maurice Caldwell was guilty, was a cold-blooded murderer, was a drug kingpin, she has been celebrating this release, parading herself and this guy around for years in order to back up this story that she freed an innocent angel black person. And again, she knew the whole time that this guy was guilty because she is the one who manufactured this false confession that, again, she knew was false at the time in order to get him out of prison.
Seeing Maurice walk out of prison was just like a really spectacular day.
It was like, restoring my life, and that's like a person giving birth.
We have great pictures of Maurice getting out. I've been meaning to put one up so I can, when I start to get frustrated or just bogged down in all of it.
But let us go back to the beginning. In 1991, Maurice Caldwell, then 23, was convicted of murder for a San Francisco drug deal gone bad. Nearly 2 decades later, a young lawyer at the Northern California Innocence Project, Paige Kaneb, helped with his release from prison. The victory hinged largely on declarations from Marritte Funches, Caldwell's friend, who took the blame for the killing and identified someone else as the accomplice. After Caldwell won his freedom, he went on to win an $8 million settlement from the city for his 2 decades behind bars, which is the second largest payout the city has ever made in such a case. Now, though, Funches says he lied about Caldwell's innocence, and what's more, he says that Kaneb has known about this lie but continues to represent the case publicly as an example of truth triumphing in the end. Now, it's very important for you guys to understand that this guilt is not in dispute. It never should have been in dispute, and there is in fact overwhelming evidence of Caldwell's guilt. In fact, we had an eyewitness who testified in a court of law that she saw this man, who again was an identifiable drug kingpin in the area, something the Innocence Project never wanted to tell you, who was holding the shotgun and fired it at the female victim all the way back when. In fact, the person who ended up confessing, this guy called Funches, fled the state at the time, ended up in the state of Nevada, where he ended up killing a cab driver in the city of Reno by shooting him in the back of the head, and he was already serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole for that murder in Nevada. So it's very important for you guys to understand that him taking the blame, him becoming the fall guy for this particular case, did nothing to hurt him in any regard at all whatsoever. Now, it is very important for you to understand that this is often the case with jailhouse confessions, and this is often the reason those confessions are completely disregarded. This guy was serving life without parole. There were no negative consequences for him coming forward, and in fact, he gained not only financially, but gained by having a relationship with the attorney that was working on the Caldwell case, which also included a bunch of other perks. She was actually caught sending money to his daughter, among other things that were clearly and obviously manipulative. Not to mention, she was love bombing this guy, sending him sexy and racy photos and all kinds of other things in order to trick this guy into getting on board, into saying that he actually was responsible for this. And the crazy thing is that before the hearing that ultimately ended up leading to the release of Caldwell, this man decided that he was not going to testify. So what this lawyer ended up doing was burying his ability to show up to the court to be cross-examined and trying to admit his handwritten statements without him, never mentioning to the court of law that he had already recanted that false confession.
I don't think there's a lot. Sorry, I didn't mean there's a lot specific to exonerees. I sort of meant more there's a lot about, systemic racism and what's happening today that I would definitely recommend. Trevor Noah did an incredible one of his episodes on the Daily Show from home, just talking about this week of Amy Cooper, George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and sort of what all of those things together really highlighted. And also I think one of the things that, and it really builds up to this, so you should watch the whole thing, but I thought one of the points he made that was so incredible is there are people who are upset about the looting of buildings, but why aren't they upset about the looting of Black bodies? Because that's what America has been doing for 400 years.
And I'm not making this up. The San Francisco Standard has these communications. They call them extensive communications from the prison and this woman. And Funches revealed that they had an on-again, off-again romantic relationship. And during this period of time, she represented Caldwell in court and secured his freedom. Funches solicited and received favors from Kaneb. Funches has recently filed a complaint with the authorities and handed over the phone on which he communicated with Caldwell about the case and the promises he made, and with Kaneb and their relationship to the case. You see, like I said, Funches was essentially done for. Again, life without the possibility of parole in the state of Nevada. No innocence fraud magic was going to get him out of that particular murder. So essentially what he ended up doing was confessing so that Caldwell could get out of prison, so that he could get a settlement on the agreement that he would get a piece of the settlement. So the reason that this guy is coming forward now again and turning over the phone to authorities is because he believes that he's owed $2 million in the $8 million settlement that the city of San Francisco paid out to the guilty Caldwell. So he's upset because the payments ended up stopping, the ones that were going to his family, after this guy ended up getting out of prison. And he feels like he was used and abused by this attorney. And when you look at the messages, you realize that's definitely the case. Now, the disclosures add up to a complicated story of a murder, a friendship gone bad, a forbidden love, and a series of betrayals. They also raise troubling questions about the much lauded Innocence Project and the lengths to which one of its top lawyers was willing to go to free a man convicted of murder. And I will add, a man that she knew was guilty. Now, of course, neither Kaneb, the attorney at the center of this woke, insane woman, nor Caldwell, the guy who made out like a bandit from this, decided that they were going to respond to this, because why would they? They already got their freedom, they already got their money, they already got their credit, they already thought that they got away with it, and now they're going to dismiss the very same jailhouse informant that they ended up manipulating to testify in order to get all of that as a crazy person who honestly shouldn't be trusted, although you should definitely trust his testimony as it was handwritten, even though he wouldn't say it in a court of law way back when.
The 1619 Project by the New York Times is incredible. I think there are actually a lot of resources right now. If you look up like equity challenges, and as I mentioned, NCIP is doing this 21-day racial equity challenge, or it gives you readings for each day. Anything by Ta-Nehisi Coates is a must read. I've been rereading his Atlantic article, The Case for Reparations, anything the Atlantic publishes, basically. But I think understanding reparations and the importance of it, and understanding this like continuum that of oppression that Black people have experienced, that it's not something that was just in the past, but has been ongoing and has never really stopped.
Now, the Innocence Project of California said that Maurice Caldwell, whose exoneration was in 2011, was based on widely corroborated facts and testimony, and believes that these claims have no bearing on the rightful exoneration of this innocent man. Now, again, to clarify something in the timeline, he was fake exonerated back in 2011 based on this fraudulent testimony. He ends up filing a lawsuit for money in order to get that $8 million, and ultimately it ends up getting paid out in 21 post the Black Lives Matter riots, and this is why the other guy, Funches, got so mad, because he just saw his friend, who definitely committed the murder, get out and make out like a bandit, and all of a sudden his payments and all his messages ended up stopping. Now, like I said, the murder of Judy Acosta happened on June 30th, 1990, and before they gathered enough evidence to charge both of these individuals in that murder, Funches had fled to Nevada. He ended up getting arrested in that state for murdering a cab driver, but both of these people were eventually convicted of those respective murders, and they were serving time in prison. Fast forward to 2007, when Kaneb, fresh out of law school, joins the California Innocence Project, or the Northern California Innocence Project, and she decides that she's going to take up this case. And part of her strategy, because this is always the strategy with the Innocence Project, is to manipulate and do anything necessary in order to get her client out, including entering in a very unscrupulous romantic affair with Funches in order to manipulate him into submitting testimony, claiming that this other guy, who was a poster child for the Innocence Project after he was gotten out of prison, was an innocent angel. Now, she ends up meeting Funches in 2010 when he was in prison to secure his cooperation in her fight to get Caldwell's release. Years later, Kaneb would reflect on the meeting in a text message to Funches. You can actually see the screenshots of these messages, but I will read it from you from the article so you can understand what was going on. Quote, "I still remember that first visit. You were looking at Linda." This is in reference to Linda Starr, the Northern California Innocence Project founder, who was also at the prison the whole time, and I took my hair out. Kaneb would later text Funches, "I wanted you to look at me. I've never admitted this before. I remember when she left for a few minutes, It was like my chest would explode, and we began talking. There's also messages from him that read, and you can read them from the screen, was remembering the last time we touched. Her child was still just a tiny bump in her belly. You were so beautiful pregnant. There was nothing I would not do to protect you. I remember that day as well, spending the whole day with you. Even though we only had a few minutes to really talk, I hated leaving you there. Now, these are obviously wildly inappropriate, flirty messages between an attorney who is representing a different client and a so-called I just found my conscience confessor who would ultimately end up providing the key information in order to get that client out of prison. Obviously, she is trying to make him seem like she's more into him than she actually is. As their relationship blossomed, Kaneb began helping Funches in ways that legal experts say may have been inappropriate, giving his status as a witness in Caldwell's case. According to the court filings in Colvin's civil rights lawsuit, city attorneys stated that Kaneb gave Funches what was potentially legal and medical aid and passed along money to his daughter, despite also crafting his declaration in the case to free Caldwell. Kaneb and the Northern California Innocence Project had said that Funches asked for but was not given legal aid. Court records show Kaneb acknowledged providing assistance in his 2016 deposition, but said what she did for Funches did not cross any ethical lines. While there was no specific rule barring a lawyer from having a relationship with a witness, if the court knew about Kaneb's relationship with Funches, any testimony would almost certainly be discredited, said legal ethicist Richard Citrin, who teaches at UC San Francisco Law. Now we have more messages from the two, including exchanging images, and these messages include things like good night, beautiful, sleep tight, love you, and then a message that says, I love you, I'll see you in my dreams, good night, handsome, just fell asleep on the couch, or just woke up from it. And then there's images going back and forth, P.S. I hope you've been liking at least some of the music I've sent, and then she says, it's a lovely smile, because there's an image right there for, again, my podcast listeners. Now, again, there are phone calls, videos, images, recordings, etc. that all show what has been going on between these two individuals, including this guy from prison saying, you know that I lied about this, I did it for you, and her bearing that information. Again, her manipulating the situation so that his written statement could be used in the civil case, which ended up netting Caldwell $8 million, but not having him testify in person because he would have given up the goods on this particular scam. Now, what's crazy is that this Funches guy is a double murderer, and not only did they have this relationship and then break up, but apparently they reconnected when Kaneb was in the process of breaking up with her boyfriend, and then the photos and images and all that started to resume. Again, there are samples of these images available here, of these videos in this article. It will be linked in the description. You can see it for yourself. She's even making kissy faces in some of these what look like gifts that were made. Now, as you can see, they're exchanging images. I'm blocking out some of the shirtless ones, even though they shouldn't violate YouTube's terms of service. But then we get to the text, and they read as follows. I'm over here biting my lip and feeling my female parts twitch. It's censored. You guys can use your imagination. Damn, Akemba. You really got me saying yes to all sorts of things outside my comfort zone, so I know I'm gonna do all sorts of things with you I've never done before. She then sends images of her in some like kind of robe or whatever, and she says nothing underneath in those last two with the smiley face. And he says, my imagination is going crazy right now with the smiling face. Again, double murderer, she's texting. He says, I still want to see you. I like seeing you look at yourself in the mirror, knowing I'm looking at you, knowing what I'm going to be doing looking at you. And then she sends an image of her not wearing anything that was thankfully cut off by the standard. He messages, I want that so bad. I want you. Yeah, the sex too, but you, Paige, if I were the moon, you'd be my earth. And I'd gladly spend eternity raising your tides. She replies, oh, great line, you have me. Among those racy messages, she was also telling her that she loved him and all of that. And then ultimately, he ends up sending a message in December of 2023 saying clearly that he already told her that he lied about Caldwell's innocence. Now, she pushed back saying, quote, I thought there was an innocent person. Do not effing claim that you told me the truth because you did not, end quote. again, trying to save face. In response, he says, quote, "You may have not wanted to hear me, and I'll accept that from you." He acknowledged that he didn't, quote, flat out tell her Caldwell was guilty, but he says Maurice isn't everything you think he is, among other things. I'm not gonna lie, there's a safety in distance for me. So you think if my feelings were real, I'd want you to be here and do anything to make it happen. But that's the opposite for me. The realness makes me grateful for the space. He responds, "You never loved me, you loved him. He's the one you fought for, he's the one you made a millionaire." Now, by the end of this February, their relationship had completely fallen apart, and this guy ended up realizing that she was playing him, she was paying him, and she was doing all these tricks in order to get Caldwell out of prison, because likely this desperate woman, this cat lady who's been sending nudes or lewds to prisoners, is into Caldwell as much as, if not more so, than this guy, because that's a murderer that she got out of prison, and she's very excited to do so. Now, that part is just my speculation, but this is overwhelming evidence of impropriety in the exoneration and in the civil lawsuit that ended up freeing this guilty man, this murderer, and now the Innocence Project is just trying to wash their hands of it, pretend it away, and Caldwell and this attorney are totally in the wind. Now again, this article has plenty of messages for you to review. Racy messages that I don't want to read, honestly, because they're disgusting. Exchanges of photos that are nudes, lewds, all of that. Over 9,000 individual communications, I believe, since 2021, not to mention all the communications before. And again, you can see how this whole entire situation has been manipulated, all in the service of getting a guilty murderer out of prison. This woman, this attorney for the Innocence Project, who is being celebrated, essentially bribed this man through payments to his family, bribed this man with sexual favors in order to get a man that she knew was guilty out of prison, that he told her was guilty out of prison, and in order to get him paid, in order to have a celebration tour for Caldwell, who just murdered a woman during a drug deal gone wrong back in the 1990s, isn't he entitled to over $8 million? This is what the Innocence Project is. This is who these people are. It's not an isolated incident. It happens every time we cover a story related to them, and it's absolutely shameful. You need to know this, and by the way, start sending the article to every YouTuber that you know that covers these kind of things, but for whatever reason doesn't cover the Innocence Project. I'm tired of being the biggest kid on the block against them. We need to rally against them as a group and take down their damn reputation, because money, celebrity endorsements, all these other things are in their favor, and guess what? They continuously let out guilty people. But you know what? Those are just my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, shown by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about more Innocence fraud. Till next time.